Hi there, Andrew Lessman here with a little video blog talking a little bit about our upcoming monthly special for October, Choco Nuvo, which has me speaking a little bit about climate change and global warming. And you're probably scratching your head and thinking, what the heck do those two have to do with one another? What does chocolate have to do with climate change? Well, actually, it has a few things to do because climate change actually is changing the regions in which, some fragile regions in which cocoa is grown. But the real reason there's a connection is because typically we would be preparing to ship our Choco Nuvo. It goes away over the summer because chocolate melts. And our dark chocolate is uniquely creamy, so it has an even greater propensity to potentially melt in the heat of summer. Typically, we'd be getting all ready, maybe even starting to ship some orders toward the end of around the 20th or so of September. Here we are, well past the 20th of September, getting close to the very beginning of October, and it's still too warm to ship. So normally we would have, in the few years we've had this product, we would have already been ready to ship all our orders on October 1st. Not going to be happening this year. We're probably going to wait until October 7th to October 10th, and the reason why is this is, in most places, the hottest summer on record, and it's continuing. I'm in the mountains of Colorado at over 8,000 feet of altitude. It's still over 70 degrees here, which is unusual at over 8,000 feet of altitude and close to the beginning of October. I've been here in this time of summer or fall and seen snow. So it's unusual. I was in Denver the other day, I think on Sunday, and it was over 90 degrees in Denver. Denver's the mile-high city. It's 5,280 feet of altitude. It was over 90 degrees at the end of September. So things are changing. We've talked about this before, so it's going to have an impact on when our remarkable chocolate is going to be shipped. And of course, our chocolate, unlike any other chocolate in the world, it lowers cholesterol. It's a dark chocolate. And it's not a candy. It's designed to be a dark chocolate extract of the cocoa bean. Ours is also uniquely low in sugar. Our 91% contains less than half a gram of sugar in that 26 calorie square. Even our 74% has barely over a gram of sugar. And the reason we could use so little sugar and have a product that's reviewed as being so sweet and delicious is because the variety of chocolate of cocoa that I selected is inherently less bitter. And that works for the American palate, works for my palate. Most Americans like milk chocolate, creamy milk chocolate, not bitter. So my dark chocolate is as creamy as milk chocolate, but it's not bitter. But it has the richness of dark chocolate, has the protective compounds and the protective benefits of dark chocolate, and the plant sterol esters we add, that lowers total and LDL cholesterol. You could take it with cholesterol-lowering drugs, not an impact at all in terms of health, but it will lower your cholesterol even further because it works independently of those cholesterol-lowering drugs, which affect your liver, enzymes in your liver, HMG-CoA reductase, in fact. This works by just working in your digestive system. So you don't have to worry about this, no warnings or side effects or issues. It's just healthy chocolate that takes advantage of a compound found in healthy vegetables that lowers your cholesterol. And it will be the best tasting dark chocolate you've ever had. I say that without equivocation, without a doubt, with the confidence of simply reading the reviews on this product. So even milk chocolate lovers who typically hate dark chocolate, you can read hundreds of reviews where they're saying they fell in love with this product. So best pricing other than a Today Special. The Today Special will be in December for our Choco Nuvo. So great pricing you're going to be experiencing in October and throughout the month of October. We will, as I said, be shipping a little later because of the warmth, because of the heat. And when it comes to climate change, I'll digress a little bit here. Also, I had read on one of the blog posts that I think I said somewhere that I'm politically conservative, which people, I think, misinterpreted. The way I mean conservative, and I generally avoid politics, I don't even think climate change is a political issue, which I'll speak about in a moment. It's just a science issue, and as I often say, if people don't accept the fact that climate change is occurring and that global warming is occurring, they should really hold on to their seat because it's just basic science. And why do I say hold on to their seat? Because it probably means they're going to be flying off into space because they must not believe in gravity. So science is indisputable fact. And what's happening on our planet is indisputable fact. And it's something that I, probably going back almost 40 years ago, I was taking a course in environmental medicine. And even back then, 40 years ago, they were talking about the fact that changing climate is changing regions in the world in which, say, mosquitoes live. And those habitats affect the diseases that we might be vulnerable to. As we now know in the US, we even have West Nile. We have all sorts of diseases that were not typical. And the territory, even ticks, that spread Lyme disease. Their territories are expanding for reasons that also relate to change in climate. So climate is changing. It's not a political fact, it's a scientific fact. And one of the more fascinating issues that relate to it, where I feel most comfortable expressing it as a non-political issue, is one of the reasons for decades in this country that we viewed climate change as being false or a fiction or imagined or not proven, is because those that had the greatest economic interest in avoiding climate change and perceptions of climate change, the fossil fuel industry, were denying it and spending extravagant amounts of money influencing politicians, influencing public opinion, so that we didn't believe that climate change was actually something that was occurring. Reminds me of cigarettes. For decades, cigarettes were denied as being the cause of lung cancer, heart disease, emphysema. Eventually, even the cigarette companies had to acknowledge that fact, but it's not as though public opinion and perception changed immediately with that. It takes a period of time. The relevance of all this is you could go online now, and maybe I should find the articles and actually post them adjacent to this blog. There are some memos or articles, research papers that were published, I think it was by Exxon. It was before Exxon and Mobil merged. I think it was Exxon, and perhaps the other company was Shell Oil. Two of the world's largest oil companies. Exxon, I believe, is an American company. Shell, I believe, might be a British company. But they had very well-researched scientific papers published in the 1980s, I think 82 and 87, something like that. And in these papers, they discussed exactly what you would read in a scientific discussion of climate change and global warming today, predicting a raise in temperature of 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, predicting a raise in sea level that could be as much as a meter, that CO2 levels in the atmosphere would double, whether by 2030 it was, or 2060. But all these things were discussed by memos, internal memos, and accepted as scientific fact by the oil companies. And they recognized that their activities, liberating carbon dioxide as fossil fuels are burned, this was the natural consequence of their activities. It didn't mean they wanted to publicize these things, and in fact, they have all invested heavily in misinformation, disinformation, and making sure that we didn't, even to this day, accept this as unequivocal, even though the scientific community, it's approaching 100% consensus within the scientific community that climate change occurs. Even those diehards that are non-scientific, even those political diehards, now might say that climate change, they agree it's happening, they agree it exists, we see the changes in weather, we see the statistical changes that have no explanation other than something outside is affecting our weather. And then they question how much man might be affecting it. It's the fact that we have liberated millions, if not billions of years of solid carbon that's been trapped in, say, whether it's going to be trapped in coal or trapped in fuel oil. It's trapped in a solid form that was beneath the crust of our Earth. It wasn't part of our atmosphere. When we burn those things, those millions or billions of years of solid carbon become liberated in our atmosphere in a gaseous form, whether it's CO2, whether it might be methane. So these are all things that we know are occurring. And the reason why I mention those research papers is, yes, it's interesting that they knew about this 40 years ago, and they did their best, 30, 40 years ago, did their best to keep it out of the public view. But what's fascinating now is there's actually a consortium, you don't hear about it much, a consortium of oil companies. I believe ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, I think even, the Saudi oil company, what are they called there? I think Aramco. These companies are part of this consortium that are now agree that steps need to be taken to stem the consequences, to reverse the consequences of global warming, which are going to be catastrophic, which even in those memos published 30 plus years ago, they refer to these changes using words like that, catastrophic, the most disruptive changes that we'll ever see on this planet. which my perception, that is the case. So as far as I'm concerned, and I guess Choco Nouveau gave me a chance to talk about climate change and talk about it from a more scientific standpoint, if we look at why, as a country and as a planet, we sort of denied the existence of these obvious changes. We know the world isn't flat anymore, even though there's a whole bunch of people online who will tell you it is, that even when science is staring us in the face, and without science, we don't have the cell phones we use, we don't have the electricity in our homes, we don't have light bulbs, we don't have microwave ovens, we don't have regular ovens, we don't have any of these things that are all part and parcel of science. And science is what's telling us. It basically explains the world around us, that the weather climate is changing. What had us denying this, so many of us, for decades and decades, reasonably so, was the information that we trusted from people, entities, companies that have trillions of dollars invested, they had interests, and are not believing that the climate could be changing as a result of what we're doing, what we're burning. So it's fascinating that those companies actually knew about this 30 plus years ago. So while they were fueling the denial, pun intended, so while they were fueling the denial, they had the science and kept the science from us about the fact that climate was changing as a result of what they were doing. What I think completes the circle and lets us know that there's no reason to deny this anymore, and we have every reason to take care of this, or it's catastrophic for us, our children, and our grandchildren. What really completes the circle is the fact that these organizations themselves are now investing enormous amounts of money in trying to contend with the consequences of their actions. They now understand it, they now get it, so they can't hide behind the science because the science is out. They can't hide the science any longer. So, and again, to complete another topic where I had said I was politically conservative, and I'll maybe mention this in another blog I'm doing. By politically conservative, I really use the word in terms of conservative in that I try to make rational, logical decisions. I'm someone who tends to politically be kind of either side of the middle. I'm someone who tends to be probably more libertarian in terms of wanting smaller government and things like that, giving individuals the right to make their own decisions. Certainly, if people are discussing me being politically conservative, one doesn't think it's consistent with someone being politically conservative. That would be an entirely solar-powered company for the past 20 plus years. Solar power, alternative energy, speaking about, say, climate change the way I do is not necessarily something that's thought of as politically conservative. What I am is politically logical, sensible, reasonable. And I wish all of us could be that way, because there'd be a lot less partisan politics, a lot less disagreement, and a lot more. I could basically discuss any political issue with anyone, and I could find some points we can always agree on. And it's not going to be something that's going to get me angry. We're all in this together. We're all trying to resolve a lot of very important issues in this country. And unfortunately, the language we use, the emotions get a bit pitched and angry, and no real resolutions. I learned when I was very young, and my parents taught me this, that we don't tend to resolve much when we're angry. We tend to be less logical, we tend to be less rational, we tend to be less kind, compassionate, and respectful. So hopefully our country and this planet can find a way to resolve these issues in a fashion that's respectful to the planet and respectful to all of us. Hopefully my discussion of climate change, again, it's not a political issue, it's a scientific issue, and I could go through all the science. Plus I'm someone who, I like to hike and run and mountain bike in the mountains at altitude. You merely have to spend time in the mountains at altitude or in the northern latitudes to realize that things are changing, and changing dramatically just in my lifetime. And so we need to do something, or the consequences are going to continue to mount for all of us. It will be the most intelligent and sensible investment we could ever make as a country, as a planet. So hopefully we take care of this, and believe me, and I should post these memos from the oil industry that they knew back in the 80s. The folks with the greatest vested interest in keeping us blind about climate change knew it was happening 3 decades ago. And now they're finally grouping together to take steps. So I admire and respect that they're finally doing it. Hopefully it's not too little too late by all of us, but I'm certainly doing my best as a company to make sure that I'm not contributing, because we have no carbon footprint, that I'm not contributing to climate change any further. So hopefully real large companies, not a little company like mine, will take the same kind of steps I have taken, because those would certainly be in the best interests of all of us. So hopefully I cleared up some questions about climate change, maybe my politics as well, that I'm what I would call a rational conservative or a rational pragmatic liberal, but I'm someone who has common sense views that finds myself either side of the middle, and rarely finds myself at odds with just about anyone, because there's always a common ground we could always find if we keep ourselves calm and we just respect the people that we might disagree with. So I hope that was helpful. I hope to give a little more insight into my views, and I'll see everybody in a few weeks at HSN.